It is time to dive into my favorite of all segments, except for trivia. Trivia is the best, truly. But Spencer's scale of agreement. You send me a take, I tell you 1 to 10, half numbers included, how much I agree and why. Here we go. Here we go, Jim. Going to be hearing that this weekend. 2026, this is the SSA, of course. 2026 is Oregon's best chance to win their first natty. Oof, 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 oof. Best chance. Well, you can only look at it on paper, right? Because in retrospect, there's a different way to look at a season and the opportunity that you had. 2010 was a great chance for Oregon to win a national championship. I mean, they were within 3 points in one correctly officiated play from possibly doing so. And going into that year, yeah, off a Rose Bowl loss and Pac-10 championship, I certainly had high hopes. I was 13 when that season began. How about that? Oh, boy, that was a long time ago. That was more than half my life ago. Okay, all right, we're done with that conversation now. So, yeah, I look back at that year and say, well, obviously it was a great chance. But going into it, obviously I didn't think about it as much as I think about these sorts of things now. Frankly, I probably would have been, I'll tell you retroactively, I probably would have been doubting that team. Because remember, Masoli had the off-field incident, was dismissed from the team, and Darren Thomas was the starting quarterback. And I would have been on here saying, I don't know when Darren Thomas is as a quarterback. I mean, it's going to be his first year starting. All we'd seen him in was a trick play in the end of a Boise State game. That was it. That was it. What could he possibly be? Well, he worked out pretty well. Going into 2011, I probably would have said Oregon's chances are really good. And they had a great season. They just didn't have a good enough season back then in the BCS. So I think the years on paper you'd compare it to 2014 when they, of course, made the national championship game with Mariota back. You know, you can directly compare that to Dante Moore returning. I think the caliber of NFL talent on this roster is even greater than the one on that roster. And there were a lot of NFL dudes, DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead, to name a couple, but not all of them were on that team. Is it the best on paper chance, David? Can I come back to that? I need to think on that a little bit more. I've got another SSA for this segment, so let me get back to that. That's a stumper. I want to preface this next SSA by noting that Drew Mehringer and Chris Hampton's hires have been made official. So Chris Hampton will be the defense coordinator. Drew Mehringer will be the OC. You may make of that, of course, whatever you'd like. This SSA comes in. If Oregon doesn't win the Natty again this next season, and Dan Lanning should take over as the DC, I presume you mean the play caller, while still managing the head coach position. Well, yeah, duh. I don't think he'd say, I'm going to be DC. Someone else should come be the head coach. Like, no, that's not going to happen. Or pay big and go hire the two absolute best head coach / OCs on the market, like a Jim Knowles and Chip Kelly type caller. Yeah, there's a gambling element. This will be a recurring theme on the show. Mehringer is 38 years old. Obviously, Dan Lanning thinks very highly of him, but he's young and has not called plays in a while. Chris Hampton is 39. So currently, the three most important coaches on Dan Lanning's staff are under 40 years old, including himself. Now, let's note that while also pointing out that Bryant Haynes, the best coordinator in all of college football, Indiana's defensive coordinator, is 40. Their offensive coordinator is Mike Shanahan. I think he's got to have a junior in there somewhere. He is, I'm trying to find his age in real time. He's born 1989. What does that make him? 40? Yeah, he's in his mid 40s. Or no, is he in his that's mid 30s? I think that'd be mid 30s. Yeah. So they're both very young. I get the urge to try and find an answer, a response, a quick fix, a reason why Oregon keeps coming up short. Age is just a number. Experience absolutely matters. I think you've seen that in the games that Dan Lanning has struggled with the most. He's 0-2 against Curt Cignetti, 0-2 or 0-3 against Kalen DeBoer. What do those coaches have in common? They've coached way more football than him. That doesn't feel like a coincidence. Who did he lose to last year in the playoff? Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles. They've seen a lot more football. So I understand that instinct. However, I don't think that if you have the right guys, how old you are doesn't necessarily matter. It can help. It can absolutely help. But I don't question Drew Maringer solely because he's 39 years old. Because if Bryant Haynes were Oregon's defensive coordinator, we'd be having a different conversation. He's 40. So I get where your head's at. I'd be pretty bullish on the show. Again, more hypothetical Spencer thoughts here. I think I'd be pretty bullish if Oregon doesn't win it all next year. If the blowout happens again in the playoff, yeah, depending on which side of the ball I feel like is more responsible there, you could see me come on the show very easily and say Oregon needs a different coordinator. That's entirely possible. We also might be, hopefully, a year from now, getting ready for the national championship game. And we're looking at Dan Lanning going, this guy's brilliant. He knew all along that these two were the right guys. That's what I'm looking. But I don't think your premise is ridiculous. I'll give you a 6 on that one. I'll give you a 6. Look, I remember when Lanning got hired, I wanted him to call plays. Because the word on Tosh Lupoi was, number one, he hasn't done it in a while, and number two, he wasn't great at it when he was at Alabama relative to the expectation there, and Tosh got significantly better over the last couple of years. I think we can all agree with that. The first year or two of the Oregon defense since Dan Lanning got hired is why I wanted him to call plays. He was very good at it at Georgia. By the way, since Dan Lanning left Georgia, it has not been the same on that side of the ball. Just worthy of note. I'm not sitting here telling you Kirby Smart is a fool. I'm just telling you that I've watched a lot of Georgia. They don't look the same since Lanning hasn't been there. That's not a coincidence. So, yeah, I think the general premise of this second SSA is coordinators would need to be significantly assessed if they don't win the national championship. Very high standard, but That's what Oregon's got on paper. And so if that doesn't come to fruition, you got to look at the coaching staff there. So, yeah, I'll give that one a 6. All right, I'll come back to this one. 2026 is Oregon's best chance to win their first natty. Best chance. I don't know, man. 24 was a really good chance. I stand by what I said. Even though Oregon got further this year, I think 24 was the wrong playoff format. That team was so experienced, so veteran, very good, incredibly talented. Record number of guys drafted into the NFL from that team. And they ran into a buzzsaw and got outcoached. So, on paper, is this team in a better position than 2024? I think I need to see how the portal shakes out first. But I do like the secondary a lot more. I think I got to give that a... it is the first time I've ever said natty or bust, and I'm not the only one, and I'm standing by that. I'm giving this one... There have been a lot of seasons of Oregon football. I'm going to give that a 7.5. On paper, yeah. I think it's the best chance Oregon has ever had. There have been other ones, but man, you just convinced a top 2 pick at quarterback to return, 4 NFL defensive linemen, replaced one NFL safety with another, replaced an NFL tight end with another, and you've got maybe the best, most talented receiving core in the history of the program. That's a lot.